Hey, what's up guys? And today I'm bringing you a little work that's a bit different from the others I've already brought to you. But before we can continue with this video, I ask you to subscribe to the channel. But everything started on that fateful day, that day when monsters decided to invade the Earth through portals. But at that moment, a new era began. The era of adventurers. So the process of becoming an adventurer was just like a gacha game, where everyone hoped to get a very rare and much better character with good equipment to be lucky, or to be able to kill strong monsters. Some were lucky, but others were not so fortunate. And too bad for those who weren't lucky. That wasn't the case for our protagonist, as he was lucky enough to get a chance to become an adventurer. At the moment, he gained the class. The class he gained was Golden Hunter. But unfortunately, his body couldn't handle so much magic from an adventurer, and due to this, he won't be able to take on the profession he just awakened. No profession? How come? Everyone has one. But others, well, welcome to him. He was quite lucky to get into this world, but even luckier to survive for so long in this world. And also, an adventurer was nothing more than a piece of trash. What he lived was just a dream. What this guy said could become reality. He met a tragic end, dying in a totally unknown dimension. We see him waking up, but in this dimension, a voice appears saying that he can wake up, but he can return to the way he lived before, which is simply to live until that certain point where he would die again, or have another choice. This choice was to control all the monsters of the Underworld. And today, I bring you a little work where there's that touch of revenge with the OP Cheng. This scene is then shifted to another place. City R country. There are countless professions in the world, but many professions require some choices. These choices are simple. You can wake up at 6 a.m. and work like crazy until the afternoon. The goal was just to achieve what you so dream of, the life you so desire. And in this world, some people reach the finish line much sooner than others, while others never even get to the finish line. He always works in a place where whenever he enters, he ends up finding the armor he always wanted. He always passes by here, looking with the goal that one day in the future, he will buy this armor. And although he is not considered an adventurer at the moment, he is working hard to get there, and maybe here to be someone stronger in the future. He already studies the magic rate. Currently, the magic rate reaches 15% compared to before. Nothing has changed. But at this moment, someone enters, and another says that the young master doesn't have much time and needed to find a lot of powerful armor to enter some dungeons out there. Then a maid appears saying that there were several things, but he asks her not to show that trash. He wants good stuff. She then mentions that some new things have arrived and asks him to follow her. And after a while, they arrive at a more powerful armor. This was a new armor that had arrived for them. It has a much more powerful reinforcement, a chance to defeat much stronger monsters than he imagines. But at this moment, our hero then starts to walk towards these armors, and he ends up noticing him, and thus he approaches thinking that this guy was a reporter. No, not a reporter, maybe he was an adventurer. He then realizes that the adventurer was level 3. He tried to understand what this failed kid was trying to do here in such an expensive store. He comments that, "You were a level 3 guy, what was trash like you doing here?" Moreover, this was a store for people who could only complete high-level hides. He shouldn't be here. Besides, he would never even dream of seeing a monster being outside. And then we realize that this guy is a guy who pays a lot of taxes, but he doesn't pay taxes for low-level people like this one, so knowing that this guy was too wild, he just thinks about walking straight and ignores this thing. But he asks him to stop at the moment. He just wanted to avoid trouble, but he ends up asking how a level 3 guy managed to get there without even completing a dungeon. By putting his hand on his shoulder, he simply smacks his hand away, which quickly irritates this guy. Then we discover that his arm was completely filled with magic, which allowed him to kill monsters, but he ends up putting a little bit of power into his fists and asks him to repeat, "Don't touch me." With just one punch, he perfectly landed it on our hero's stomach. He asks this little loser here to fight more and get stronger. He asks him to fight hard to at least get strong in this world as here. Then he realizes that he might be a spy who was basically here reporting several things that were happening, and if he was reporting things, things would get bad for him. At the moment, he falls to the ground, The girl approaches and asks if he was okay. At that moment, that arrogant guy tells him not to show up in front of him again, as next time he won't just be punching our hero, but will be sending him to another world. Getting up, he says he is fine now and moves in another direction. So, after he leaves, he ends up recovering. But he was an adventurer. Only he would never become a true adventurer, as an adventurer without a profession will never have a future. No matter how much he looked to the future, one day a strange portal suddenly appeared in his world, and that cliché of all clichés happens here. He couldn't even predict what would be happening in this world, so the world's presidents thought about using nuclear bombs. But it was at this moment that some people awakened with some mysterious powers, and they managed to defeat these monsters in a frantic battle. After a long time of study, they discovered how it works to make an adventurer emerge in the world. Common people should basically kill monsters to acquire points. With points, you can awaken a class, and in this way, he also acquired his class. But we also found out that over time, companies also evolved, making it so that in this world, people got rich more quickly and practically by becoming hunters. However, as more time passed, companies saw that strong hunters are what bring in more profit, so the strong ones they choose. The weak ones they discard, which means that those who are poor in this world are basically killed for nothing. Because monsters also appear in very poor places, and hunters go hunt the monsters but accidentally end up wiping out the poor as well. But his goal was to change that. Here we are cut to a place where there were several level 20, level 21 hunters, and so on. But among others around was our hero, who was level 3. Seeing that there were several level 20 hunters here, he realizes that things are going to get ugly when entering that portal, but at the moment, his friends end up calling him. They were Uncle Zeng and Shang Huan and also Hugo Z. He just said that the dungeon would be very dangerous. But at that moment, another person appears, saying that she will also participate in this raid. He pulled out his special card, where maybe with his help, he would be able to find a secret raid. He then realizes that she is coming against his progress, saying that inside the raid, they wouldn't get anything good. But he said it wasn't so useless to try their luck because if they succeeded, it was profit. However, someone ends up entering with them. His attention turns to that arrogant guy from before, Young Master. They are happy to see that he was here. He just asks them to shut up and start right away. He looks at his arrogant partner and discovers that he was that guy from before. Well, he looks in his direction, but quickly he turns to another direction. But again, that guy ends up putting his hand on his shoulder, approaching. He wonders if he really took his words seriously that he couldn't get closer to our young master here. But again, he asks him to mind his own business, and that this was none of his concern. Again, this makes him irritated. He grabs his head, and with that, he ends up kicking Cheng in the stomach. Then he spits out a fire where he wanted to roast our hero. But at that moment, someone said that, look at what he was doing. He was going to kill the guy in front of everyone if by chance he does that. They will be reporting this guy there to an association where he will have his future completely shattered. A girl with pink hair asks him not to make so many jokes since he was in front of everyone. So right. He gets up, and even so, he ends up kind of feeling sorry for this hunter for seeing that he was brave, but he wonders what makes him so brave like that to enter a high-level RA like this. He even offers to help him, but he ignores at that moment. The pink-haired one approaches and asks if Sheng was okay, but seeing that he did a big favor by keeping that kid alive, it was amazing to see that this guy is a good-hearted guy. But leaking, he comments with someone on the cell phone, but the other guy comments for them to stay in line because they will be entering this dungeon already. The pink-haired one asks if Chang was still okay, if he felt bad, but here they start to explain one thing, that when entering the portal, they are sent to a kind of different dimension. Besides, the Dangos only allow strong people to enter there. However, the dungeons are classified from A to C or D. However, he could only handle level D. However, to handle something more than level D, like a level E, it was necessary to have a level from 1 to 5, which means now they are entering a very weak dungeon. Like this dungeon, only failed ones enter. Only when someone hires them that they can enter dungeons like this. but the portal only closes after the battle ends. When killing the boss, at this moment he enters that portal. He entered the portal, but Sheng thought that now was a moment bigger than D. He needed to endure everything that was inside, and no matter how, Sheng then enters. But as soon as he comes out on the other side of the portal, he starts to bleed from the nose. He grabs his stomach and starts to think this was the experience he had before. But so why was this happening again? That girl from before asks if Sheng was okay. His companion also says the same thing, but however, other adventurers just ask to leave that failure behind. It's not worth having him on their team. But not to be left behind, he said he was okay. So he gets up and starts then mining, since their goal was to mine the girl, then at that moment was looking for Sheng. She looks to one side and to another and finds him mining there somewhere else. He vomited blood just now, but now he is working so hard, but he asks her to listen, because the reason that keeps him so motivated was like that he was the abandoned adventurer. Abandoned adventurer. This is a disease that seems to be quite rare. However, if you get it, it will be accompanying you with your level. But your body having this disease ends up rejecting all the magical power that someone could have. But this disease ends up being quite mild. However, in severe cases, it ends up being carried to your organs. Many who had this disease died out of nowhere on the battlefield. Life, the person tries to heal this person who has this kind of disease, and he dies automatically. But people who can't use any skills are generally known as abandoned adventurers. And also, what led Sheng to not be able to our system of the day. But even though he is level 3 now, he has crossed dozens or thousands of portals, and in these thousands of portals, he slowly raised his level. But then, right, he also ended up discovering that there is a kind of cure. But this cure only exists inside. However, he needs a good amount of money, very high, to be able to solve this cure of his. And so he enters several guilds or anywhere that gives him money so that he can at least get some money. So then time passes in the afternoon. He fills a cart. Now they should leave since they killed several monsters. The monsters that, from now on, the monsters that appear are level 20 and above. Fighting against that was impossible, while our Sheng simply put the last rocks in the cart, but he was suspicious of something. He looked in that direction and noticed that some kind of magic was happening there. Perhaps he thinks that this place is where the boy is, but he shouldn't be fighting against monsters because he doesn't have a single chance. While storing the last things, something hits him in the back, and he falls hard to the ground. The group all approaches to see if Sheng was okay, and guess what? It was that guy, one of the friends of that arrogant guy. He told him not to get in his way, so he remembers that this guy had the same arrogance as that other guy from before, so he should basically be trying to get out of here, or else he would die. He has the disease of not being able to use magic. Now he understands why that guy hates this kid so much. A guy who can't use magic was just trash, but Sheng gets up. That girl from before asks Sheng not to approach that guy, but then, approaching that blonde-haired guy, we see him raise his hand. He said that he understands his suffering. He knows that this guy has been suffering all this time, so now he will release him from this suffering. But Sheng just smiles. He smiles at the situation, and he even remembers the words of that arrogant guy. Let me help you. No, not for him. He doesn't want help. He's been striving all this time to make it in life. Now they ask themselves, what are they? They are just some adventurers. But if they think they are some crazy idiots who want to steal each other's lives, he will show them a true terror right here. While he was about to do something, the scene is cut to that arrogant guy. The company established a new rule to hire more people, but hiring new people is a lot of work and costs a lot of money. So, he asks that companion to fight a little more seriously and also to wipe those pieces of trash off the face of the earth, because that would only get in their way. He then just asks him to do a good job with a smile. We return to our protagonist, where we see that blonde-haired guy attacking our Sheng with fire magic. People who are weak are always despised. And worse, it's almost right that strong people despise the weak even more. But he is surprised to see that he was throwing a level 3 fireball at him. If he got hit by that, it was certain death, and he tried every moment to dodge any fireball, but however, one of them ended up hitting our hero squarely. After a long time, Sheng was caught by that yellow-haired guy. But at this moment, Sheng still wasn't defeated. He holds something in his hand and walks through the smoke that was there, walking toward him. He said that if he wants to be an adventurer, then he simply can't give up here. At the moment, he thinks this boy is too dumb. Only that the disease he had, that doesn't even let him touch magic, just ends up reaching his heart. He ends up spitting blood, so being in the air, he ends up falling face first to the ground. Those arrogant ones simply laugh in his face, stepping on his head. We see him grinding his teeth. He tried to get up, but no. With a great sword in hand, he simply ends our Sheng, saying that useless people like them shouldn't exist in this world. And if possible, he will hunt down every one of these weak ones in this world to eliminate them. But now that he was caught by this giant sword from this yellow-haired guy, he asks himself, what have I done? Why did he really have to die in this state here? He had no magic. He was weak, and he was even betrayed basically by his team. He didn't want to die, and he also didn't want to have his end decided by some random extras. No. So the thing he desired at the moment was that those people who betrayed him would also have the same end as he did. His request ends up resonating throughout this dungeon. The dungeon begins to act the way he wished. That blonde-haired guy simply looks back and sees something approaching, and at that moment he is caught by some unknown guys. While that wreaked havoc, he loses consciousness, but it seems like he saw something happening, something that made him almost happy and almost sad at the same time. But what he sees is literally the god of death coming to get him, a black and white reaper. They are the two who take the path of life and death. And so, in the end, he completely fades away, but he wakes up. But looking to the side, he sees nothing. He wonders why everything around is black. However, in all this darkness, he only hears a voice. He looks to one side and then the other, and tries to find this voice. He finds that it was coming from in front of him. Here, it was like a little house. What he saw was too insane. Wow, a voice was coming from inside a house, and at that moment he sticks his hand inside, but what was inside ends up biting his finger. Then, something ends up coming out from there. And then, right, it ends up presenting itself as a pen. However, wow, the pen is surprised to see that this boy awakened his system. System? What was that? He also asks himself what place this was. This place was too empty. But what was he talking about? The gate to the Underworld is right below him. Below him, he finds the gate to the Underworld. Scared, he turns his eyes back and tries to understand what that was. But what he simply sees is a gigantic gate in front of him. It appears, right? So now that he looked a bit closer at this gate, he tries to understand things. Maybe he died. But now that he really sees that he died, he remembers the things that happened. He was ambushed by his group, and right, met his end. He ends up letting out a scream of despair for seeing that he couldn't complete what he so desired in his life when he was alive. But the pen starts thinking that this guy was already going crazy for seeing that he was screaming for no reason. But right, he says, I didn't do anything. I just wanted to find my cure, the cure for my disease. So, right, he keeps belittling himself, but the pen says, enough. He didn't want to hear that anymore. So the pen asks Sheng to follow him, and thus that pen opens the gate. Moving forward, he saw that, really, I died, so there's nothing more to do. The pen is even surprised to see that this guy accepted his death too quickly. But then, right, ignoring that, he arrives at a totally huge place. He needed to reach a place where he needed to complete some tests, like in this place. He realizes that this place was a place where a king might have lived. So, behind him, something giant appears. He ends up wondering what that thing was. The pen asks Sheng to be respectful, because that there was the body of King Yama. He asks this idiot to shut up and grab the popcorn because he was going to explain who this guy was. This is the guy who basically gives you your punishment if you did something wrong and severe in your previous life. When you were alive, you will have to go through the test. If you pass the worst test, you will have an eternal suffering. And now, if he's not mistaken. In mythology, there is a type of god who writes the duration of a person's life, but he uses a pen called King Yama. But how could an underworld ruler, a King Yama, die? He asks not to speak nonsense, but the pen says to look with his own eyes. Yes, literally, almost everything really died. In front of him, some walls appear, but on those walls, some things were written. But it was strange. He could read those things written on the walls. So, reading that, he looks to the side where he finds several people, but among those people was the king of the underworld. However, he was fighting against something. But his fight wasn't that long because he was caught, captured, and taken to the death sentence, meaning he lost his head. But for some reason, these walls here are basically recording everything he did in his past life. What was he doing? But what was he fighting? Then he thinks that maybe he's fighting against the rulers of the underworld. However, the mission appears. This mission was to find the real head of King Yama among thousands or millions of heads that will appear at this moment. So, he ends up calling for Pen and wonders what that was. Pen simply says that this was the test he mentioned earlier. If by any chance he completes the test, he will be able to return to life. After the pen tricked him, he punched it in the head. I don't know what head a pen has, but he punched its head. But here he realizes that he died, but kind of didn't die completely yet. He was still alive. One thing he can do is try to complete this mission as quickly as possible because he still has a chance to return to life. Looking more closely, near the screen of this system, he notices a reward. The reward for this mission is that he will indeed be gaining a potion that can cure any type of illness or scar on his body. As soon as he sees this, he becomes happy. He then presses yes to start. As soon as he does this, we observe from another place, above, heads falling on top of him. As these heads start to fall, he looks up and sees thousands of these heads falling here. He thought this was real. The mission was now beginning, and he should be as quick as possible while entering the head of King Yama. So, looking here, he saw a mountain of these heads. How is he going to manage to find King Yama's? But the pen appears and says that this was a test. Tests have to be difficult, because if it were easy, this wouldn't be called a test. Knowing that the pen will not help our Sheng, he realizes that he will have to look at them one by one, hunting through them. He sees that it is not easy, so he hunts one by one, but he also tries to find a clue that could possibly help him find King Yama's. But out of everything there was a stone in front of him with a giant inscription, the only thing it said being, "Will you be a true adventurer? Find me, and maybe you will discover." But for him, this was not an answer. Or was it? He ends up seeing that he found a way to find King Yama's head. So he starts digging. But the pen gets curious, wanting to know what kind of secret he found. The pen wants to know the answer from our protagonist as well, because by speaking to him, the pen might give the correct answer. But it wasn't necessary because the pen was interrupted by seeing that our Sheng managed to find what he so much wanted. That inscription also said that the king, before dying, stared fixedly at his enemy with hatred, but had a certain calmness on his face, which helped him a lot in finding King Yama. Now that he found it, he shouts for the pen to help him solve this mystery, but the pen vanishes. It starts speaking, saying that he will discover the real test here, but as soon as it says this, he sees a light shining. But as he looks closely, he only notices that the glow was coming from King Yama's head. However, that suddenly explodes, launching our Sheng far back, falling on the ground on top of all that amount of heads. We observed the pen saying that it was incredible to see that he hasn't completed his mission yet. Indeed, that exploded and launched him into the air. But now, he gets up and wonders where he went wrong, since the inscription mentioned that there were two things about King Yama's face. However, he thinks that perhaps his original face is that of a monster. The pen only saw that he was very motivated, but the pen will give him stronger motivation. It begins to say that there is a time limit here, the exact time for him to complete the mission. But now, there will also be an interference from the black and the white. They will hunt the intruders who entered here. Before he died, he simply activated the system, and this thing also ended up summoning the black and white. The system made that operate in the way the system wanted. The presence of the black and white is the protection destined to eliminate the monsters that basically cause the death of the players. But since he died at the hands of humans, it's likely that the black and white will hunt those who killed him, meaning that all the humans who were alive around there will face the judgment of the abyss. Unless he somehow manages to take control of the system, he can stop everything that is happening from then on. But at this moment, he realizes that Jiang Chen will be in trouble. If that continues, it's likely that his group is currently fighting against the black and white. Realizing that if he keeps delaying here, the black and white will hunt the people he loves most in this world. So, he should hurry to complete this mission here and return to real life soon. Besides all this, he needed to find the answer quickly. If he doesn't hurry, things will get worse, and everyone will die. But hunting them one by one, we find out that perhaps he managed to find it. In the depths, he found one. So having found it, Sheng quickly stretches his arms, grabbing that head, but the little creature was too fast. He ended up moving a bit back, but he wasn't going to give up. He goes all out towards that head. The explosion happens, but this causes smoke to rise, making several of those heads fly to the side, and he gets buried. Buried, we see him there, trying to get out quickly, and he manages to get out of that thing, fast. It only took him 20 minutes to lift those things off. Then we discover that he had been there for quite some time. He also ended up kind of triggering a trap that might help him, perhaps, to look for the head. But then the pen warns him that he only has 2 minutes of life left. It was all or nothing. Standing still, he begins to understand something. He even laughs about it. He understood that the potion from before cannot heal everyone. That potion he so desired he might have to leave aside because it was a joke. He ends up having a brief memory that on the internet he managed to find some people saying there was a Dangel dark, but that Dangel was basically a joke. He said that if you complete the test, you will get everything you want, but the dungeon basically just messes with people's heads. It plants in someone's mind that you will get something, but then it keeps placing several things, several pressures on your mind, and sooner or later, it will drive you crazy. But now, he understands the true purpose of this dungeon. This is a dungeon where it can basically drive your mind crazy, and it is a dungeon made basically for humans because humans are easily motivated by small emotions. While the coconuts flew overhead, the pen asked if he really gave up. He says that he doesn't care much about it, but if you give up, you won't be able to come back to life either. As mentioned earlier in the forum, you will be made a fool of in here. They will toy with you until the end. They even lure players just for fun. Sometimes when 2 players enter here, these guys make the players fight each other. They give a small problem for the players to solve, but it never works out. It's as if there were a small demon from another portal watching everything that was happening in there. It was as if he was playing with a child's toy. Now he even thought that maybe this could be his second chance to return to life. He then looks in the direction of the pen. Looking at it, he realizes that it was in a hurry. No, maybe it was happy, but to him, it didn't matter anymore. He no longer cared about it. But something hits the pen, and he asks it to be careful. But now, looking at it, he wonders why it was floating here. It seems that these heads are floating as if there was no gravity, everything at 0, but after a while, it stops and becomes still. But why are they floating alone up there? Like throwing a feather on water and then stirring it with a stick, it would float from one side to the other like a package moving on the water. He remembered something good. He remembers something written in the Amuro that King Yama was basically upset with something or some relationship between someone. Maybe this helps him find what he is looking for, but if he does that, he will be embarrassed. But okay, he should test something. If he does something, something will happen at this moment when he moves there in his hand. Something begins to happen, like a dark little ball appearing from the back and starts moving towards the pen. The pen realized that something was happening to him, turning in the direction of Sheng. He wonders if it was him who did that. He apologizes, saying that it was, but the pen gently begins to approach Sheng and wonders if he really didn't give up. However, we observe that Sheng wonders if he changed his attitude out of nowhere. Before, he was angry, but now he is so calm with him. Moreover, we observe that the pen, I don't know, in his vision, wasn't too worried. That thing was making 1,000 excuses, but after looking at the pen for a bit, he might have discovered the right answer. After looking at that mural in front of him, he discovered that the mural only gives main answers and hint. But the real hint is not basically on that wall, as the answer was in the system. The system says, this mission is a solo mission, and it says that he needed to find the head among the other heads. At first, he thought that the task was just to find any head, or perhaps manage to find the head to make sure that the head of King Yama wouldn't be disturbed and bring him some kind of curse. Moreover, he couldn't see the written words and also didn't know what kind of judgment should be made. But after realizing a few things, he noticed that King Yama didn't want anyone to find his head. He just wanted to live there peacefully, and it seems he invented a million traps so no one could find him. Because after a long time searching for this specific head, he saw that he couldn't find it anywhere, but the head was always in the place where he least expected, like it was right under his nose. So he reaches the place where the head was possibly located, but he sees that the thing was gigantic. Climbing on it wasn't an option, so he should be thinking about other things. But also in the text, there was something written that there was an old friend of his there. But who could this old friend of his be? He might discover that this old friend of his might be the person who could possibly solve this whole puzzle. While he was thinking, we see the pen approaching, saying 1,000 things to him again. The pen thought that our Shang had already given up on the test, but Shank looks in the direction of the pen. The pen asks him to stop looking at it because it made it shy, but he found something that could basically help him: courtesy. And so, he approaches this King Yama, and as he gets closer, we see him trying to do the same thing he thought about doing, a courtesy with good intentions, to see if this King Yama would approve of his idea. After staying there for a long time, something starts to happen. Something moves in the direction of that giant body, but after waiting for a long time, nothing happened. But here, he notices that King Yama's head placed itself on top of that giant body since he saw that King Yama didn't want courtesy. He saw that to gain his trust, it was necessary to bow to him, and since that's what King Yama wanted, he ends up bowing before this King Yama. As he bows, he calls him by his name, Yama. After saying his name, some things start to happen. Red lightning begins to emerge from above the body of that giant thing. Then we discover something new appearing above. So he saw that maybe everything worked, and if it worked, he would have the chance to return alive. But the system appears saying that the player has completed the task that was assigned to him. So what he wanted became reality. At that moment, he ends up feeling something. What he felt was definitely magic. At this moment, he discovers that his illness was cured and the test ended, and he fulfilled his promise. And now a new ability was given to him. He is the Underworld intern. Among these, there was something else written: the old friend's promise. What could this be? A new job? But then our pen appears saying that he was a foolish, ill-mannered brat. Now the pen will be devouring him. He turned with a little fear and saw that this guy got angry with him. He was just a little sensible, but it seems he really didn't want him to pass the test. But what he said before was serious. He opens his mouth and runs towards our protagonist. At that moment, he is devoured. Yama looks and says, "How incredible the test was completed," meaning that a new substitute for the king of the underworld has appeared. But the pen starts to say that no, he wouldn't do that, but it seems that his consciousness was basically disappearing. He didn't want to disappear. Here, in front of him, he finds himself already with the new candidate to become the king of the underworld. Then, also that evil pen, send it away, because the new guy who was chosen and approved to finish the test has just been chosen there by the system. His previous plans were all delayed, but with all certainty, this boy will have a future, and he will place extremely high expectations on him. And indeed, he will be the strongest guy or the guy. Yo, let's continue in the world of our hero. The adventurers are the richest people in the world. Their riches are known all over the world. And this was the age of adventurers, causing mobs of adventurers at a portal, but in their world, this is already a common sight. However, people who have children that enter the portal worry a lot, but they shouldn't worry because some always come back alive, others don't come back anymore, and those who die inside the dungeon are basically unlucky. But after they depart, the family always searches for their body. If they find it, it's a fortune. Meanwhile, the scene is cut to some lockers. Inside one of these lockers, someone was screaming. One of these things was asking to be let out of that thing. At that moment, scared, he kind of notices a light. The one who opened there was our pen. Right then, he thanks the pen for having opened that thing, which makes the pen happy. The pen tried to stand out over our hero, but Jiang Chen, stuck inside that thing, simply gets up and then ends up punching its face. Then the pen explains things to him, one of those things being that a woman appeared and ended up putting Jiang Chen inside those boxes. Later, he understands everything that happened, and now it all makes sense why he's in this morgue now. But the pen wonders why he punched its face. Our hero said he had a nightmare, one of the main reasons. But the security officers of the Adventurers Association must have noticed that the adventurers who entered that portal didn't come back quickly. And that means nobody survived the claws of Black and White in judgment. Which means that only he was the one who survived this whole adventure. The pen, unconcerned, said for him not to worry so much, as among them there were 2 survivors from this dungeon here. But the pen doesn't have priorities to talk about that now with our hero, as it wanted to talk about some things with priorities to our protagonist. But while staying there, thinking about what to do, the elevator ends up arriving at the place where they were. After arriving, a guy comes out of it totally frustrated with life for seeing that the Adventurers Association sent him a lot of work, because today he had been going up and down that thing too much, which made him quite tired. But at least for him, this was already his last one. However, someone passes by his side scaring him, but he asks for that thing to stop at once. After asking it to stop, he asks for it not to run in the hospital, but he couldn't stand still. However, he wonders where they were. Well, they were in the morgue. Totally scared, he ends up fainting, which makes him fall to the ground. But our hero seizes the moment and catches him in his arms. Now that he caught him, he asks the pen what he should do now. But the pen asks him to drop that guy right away, since he was a guy who had worked around here for a long time. He wouldn't be dying that easily. And so it was done. He throws the guy on the floor. Then, at that moment, he enters through a door, which makes him leave that thing. From here, everything at this moment after leaving, we can see someone apologizing while at the same time asking to take care of certain things. One of those things was to check a death list inside that dungeon that our entered. Also, people were sent to a totally unexpected dungeon. What happened to the boss to let someone so weak enter a dungeon like this? Behind, we see him there asking that no one find him here because it would be too shameful for someone to find him alive. But at this moment, he yells with the pen, which catches his attention. But here he runs to another place. The scene is cut off, already stopped at his house. Arriving at his house, we see the pen humiliating our hero, saying that his house was all this here, since in the underworld he had a much larger space. At this moment, he starts walking through his house, but because it was too spacious, he thinks that the real estate prices in the underworld were very cheap. However, the pen said that everything was free for those who had already died. At this moment, he said he had no family. He was just alone. At this moment, the pen asks what happened to his parents, and to answer, he says he only remembers a few things, that his parents were adventurers, but out of nowhere they disappeared when he was very young, and in the end, they never came back. And at this moment, he always waited in front of a portal to see if he would find them to have that piece of his. Now that he is free, he tries to look for a job, but he couldn't find anything, which left him quite surprised. The adventurers in this world had already existed for more than 2 decades. Countless professions had emerged in this world, such as necromancers or even high-class magical priests, and hidden professions like these are relics of the past stage of the underworld. This was the thing that appeared in front of him on the system screen. Maybe this would be a profession that was still hidden, a profession that no one in the world had yet unlocked, and in fact, this was a new profession, something he had never seen before, and he really has a profession that is totally rare. If in this case here he has this rare profession, he should test these things. But he also ends up wondering if he should continue in this hunter profession, since, having died for the first time, he had a unique stroke of luck in life, and he also restarted from level 1. It wouldn't be easy to compete among the other adventurers there at a higher level, and also, who is guaranteeing that he will survive now in this next adventure? Because if he dies here again, he won't come back to life. But also, in the world, there are those unfair hunters who hunt down those weak people, which means these people always dirty their hands to get what they want. He didn't want to dirty his hands, but he has to do it, because in this world, there are also people who only humiliate others for pleasure, which means that from now on, he has to get stronger. And also, here, if by chance he gives up being a hunter, he doesn't even know how he would survive, because the easiest way to make money in this world was to be an adventurer. Moreover, he ended up losing his parents, which made him suffer a lot in school at the hands of bullies. But the pen wasn't even paying attention to our hero's sad stories. He then gets up, and at this moment, he needed to check his stats. So, like this, he calls for the system. After calling for the system, he waits a little. But nothing happened. Everything that should happen, nothing happens, which leaves him quite irritated, shouting there at the pen. But the pen says that he was level 1. And how could a level 1 guy have skills? How could he not have skills, since level 1 people and hunters already enter dungeons? However, the pen asks Jiang Chen to relax, because upon rebirth, the system gave our hero a special gift. As soon as he sees that he received a gift, the system screen appears and gives him a mission. The first mission was simple. Just keep moving forward, because he needed to reach the Adventurers Association. So he ends up arriving at the Adventurers Association building. Upon arriving, he wonders what he should already be doing here. But the pen ignores everything our hero was thinking, because he saw that this place was way too big. Still, the pen tells him to relax, because only he could see it. Moreover, what was he doing inside this Hunters Association as a tourist? Which he wasn't. But at this moment, they move in another direction, arriving at an awakening chamber where he kills his first monster to awaken as an adventurer. The smell there was too strong, but he needed to move forward since the building was enormous. But at that moment, our hero wonders what they could be doing in there, but he says he can do anything he wants inside this building. But maybe this wasn't what he meant. What he meant was that this place is a place where maybe anything can be done. As he looks up, he notices that above, there's magic from countless portals. Portals were not something he felt here at the moment, but rather, all adventurers' associations have a low-level portal that can help low-level hunters evolve faster. They are tested inside this dungeon to awaken an ability, and if the adventurer's performance is good, they can be hired on the spot by a guild. But the pen wonders if our protagonist didn't already know too much. However, when he was focused on the pen, a guy passes behind him, pushing our hero. He asks him to be careful, but our pen gets irritated with this tank there for seeing that even after bumping into him, he ends up using his ability to check our hero's status. He wonders if he wouldn't be angry with this kind of person, but he says he's already used to it. And also, he was level 1. In this world, the weakest always have to bow to the strongest. However, the pen, looking at this kind of person who bows to the strongest, already sees that something quite changing is happening in this world. But at that moment, a system screen appears. At that moment, he is surprised because he saw that his mission was too easy. This was the simplest dungeon. It was the easiest mission of all, and it was easy. But the pen told him not to keep mouthing off about everything he saw, and that he doesn't have to rush. He's at level 1, so he can enter a low-level dungeon to level up quickly. So, when he says this, he enters the portal, but upon entering, he wonders why he's standing still because he discovers he was the only one who entered here, which makes him completely scared. And with fear grabbing the pen at the moment, our hero also at this moment, after grabbing the pen, asks the pen to explain more things to him, but the system screen appears, showing there that he needed to clear this dungeon alone. Hearing this from the system, he asks the pen to help him, already knowing that inside this dungeon alone he wouldn't be able to do anything. He was just a level 1 guy. Besides, this was the same thing last time too. But here he had a choice. as he could be confirming there which raid he could be going as he was level 3. The pen ends up explaining for him to choose one of the 3 raids at once, one that he could be following easily, and as soon as he chose the dungeon he would be following, he could go there to choose some things that could be placed inside, or if by chance he didn't want anything, he just needed to keep going straight. But he could also be receiving some tips on what he could do inside that dungeon. Among those dungeons mentioned by her, there was the volcanic seat at the base of the dead volcano, there was also the Siren's Lament, and lastly, the Wind Orb's Parade. Among all, he didn't know which to choose until the system said that the choice was getting harder, but for that, the pen said it would be helping him choose the good map. But this was something our hero didn't end up liking, deciding then to want to hit the pen. But the pen said it was something he would be thankful for. Maybe later. The choice was already made. He chose the Water Elves' Cemetery, and they could already be following this path where they would be arriving at the dungeon he ended up deciding to enter. The pen finds out that Jiang Chen will swallow him alive, so for that, the pen gives our hero an extra ability. Right after doing this, a system screen appears, showing that it had to be done without brush jokes. However, this thing made Jiang Chen more and more irritated, grabbing the pen by the neck again. We see the pen almost say something, but the pen says that it wasn't his choice, but the system's. And if he decides to abandon this mission, the system could do something to him. One of the things that could be done was him dying. While hearing this word, we see a memory coming into his head. One of these memories was that he didn't need to worry about celebrating his resurrection. The system gave him a gift. As soon as he talks about this gift, he puts in hand the sobriety that emerges minutes later, then a fire. A fire that ends up burning everything in front of him. Besides this ability, there was another ability. This other ability was better known as Paper Man. Using this ability on anything, he manages to basically distract his enemy, which gives him many advantages, and he also gains an ability that can maybe save the lives of things or people. Moreover, he never thought that slapping something would earn him such valuable abilities. So, with these abilities, he can already be advancing in this dungeon. In case anything happens, he also has some things like a smoke bomb, potions that can restore his mana, and besides all that, he also needed to look for something that allows him to survive more and more in this dungeon, as the Water Elves' Cemetery is basically full of enemies and full of traps that are here all the time to be catching crazy adventurers who decide to show up here in this dungeon. And also, the goal, to designate a place for the hunters to enter and also exit the dungeon, was something he also wondered about, asking why the association didn't kill the bosses. But for that, he had a reason. The reason was that the new adventurer hunters had never even participated in a dungeon. But as a team, they managed to pass by these bosses, giving them good experience for fighting stronger bosses in the future. However, in this dungeon, something was discovered. If you don't kill the bosses, the hall won't close, which allows new monsters to appear. This was something new the association was discovering, and they were using it to their advantage to test new hunters. But before everything could start, he needed to check something to prevent tragedies from happening. These are the boots, and also the gloves that allow him to walk on water. But he could also use this to discover nearby magic, something he hadn't done before, either because of that thing there, that poison that didn't allow him to use magic. He realizes that now it no longer affects him. He runs on the water, feeling happy about it, but he stops and calls our pen. After calling it, he asks the pen to come to him. For now, he was ready to proceed here ahead to fight some bosses too. This area is full of water and enormous bodies of water. Moreover, there are many ancient ruins here that they could use as cover. Also, he has here the map drawn by the association, which allows them to pass through various difficult obstacles, and so, with the map in hand, they start walking through this dungeon. But as they walk, our protagonist asks the pen not to touch those stars. Dodging those stars, we observe a frog formed by the soul of the frog, using some basic magic, but so far, they hadn't encountered any monsters that harmed them. Here, they possibly won't need to fight anything. So, walking happily through this place, we observe the system appearing. The system asks him to defeat the monster. It was uncertain if something was going to happen, but Jiang Chen wonders if the pen had exposed him to some monsters, but the pen kept denying all along, saying it didn't expose anything. But even with the denial, he continues on, advancing a little further, and he ends up arriving at a point where he finds a guard duck. At this moment, the guard duck comes face to face with him. Duckmen are monsters known for moving in flocks, but because the duck was alone, he should take the opportunity to kill something like this. But as soon as he says this, the duck starts to run, something he couldn't allow. As soon as he saw the duck running, he runs after the duckman. While running, our hero saw that around its neck was a whistle. He couldn't allow that duck to blow it, as it would call its entire group, and that wouldn't be good for him. So to finish off this monster, he uses his fireball, but the fireball was too small. What happens is that he couldn't hit the creature, but the pen appears, asking him to stop being an idiot and use it on his sword to give it a greater reach, giving him a smart idea. So he does just that, using it on his sword, and then heads towards the duckman. Getting a little closer, he attacks the monster, but the monster manages to dodge. But even so, after dodging, it starts running again. However, our protagonist pursues it. Chasing after it, he finally manages to hit the monster, causing it to fall to the ground. Falling to the ground, the pen already appears, congratulating him for using his head. However, Jiang Chen is happy to see that this ability was too good, since this skill doesn't consume that much mana, but this fire skill was stronger than the one he has now. Meanwhile, the monster kept begging, asking to be spared. The pen mocked this monster, while Jiang Chen only felt sorry for the little thing. He really needed to kill a monster like this, wondering. Here we see our protagonist realizing that the monster was going to attack him, so he also ends up grabbing his sword and putting it in front. The monster, having no chance to dodge, ends up being hit head-on. It fell to the ground, totally defeated by our hero, but the pen says that Jiang Chen almost died. However, he remains aware that he hadn't fully used his mana, but he almost did. Still, he needed to save mana, as he barely knows what could happen inside Am. Our protagonist, for some reason, does not use a spear or perhaps a real sword, as he keeps using this weak whistle here. He says some excuses that don't quite fit there either, and he also wonders why his mission is still not complete at this point. He looks to the side, where he sees several duckmen approaching him. Immediately afterward, he ends up discovering that that creature down there used its whistle, now surrounded, unable to escape anymore by anything or any monster. He wonders what will happen from here on. He has already heard all his mana fighting against just one duck. He thinks about running, but he looks to the side and realizes he's surrounded, like in a dead-end alley. He has no way out anymore, but there was still one way out, and that way out was there. Today's story starts with a single way out, the way for him to escape from the situation he got himself into. Something was approaching near him, but as soon as it got closer, we saw him grab that thing from behind his bag, causing an explosion to happen. Smoke emerged from it, deceiving the ducks about Jiang Chen. But this was perfect. This was the one chance he had to manage to escape. But as soon as he escaped, we then saw our pen left behind while the pat and the pen simultaneously searched for our hero. But at this moment, Jiang Chen was underwater. This was also the unique opportunity for him to use his maximum swimming skill to escape from there. However, it seemed to finally escape. He used a few strategies. The first was also a smoke bomb, and inside that smoke bomb, he put some fireworks, which helped a lot to distract that group of ducks. While swimming around, he kept worrying about the ducks because, if the ducks happened to find our protagonist underwater with their swimming speed, they would catch him quickly. But while swimming, he saw a shadow passing near him, though he didn't see what it really was. Still, he shouldn't worry too much since the main monsters here should only be a few PK men. He didn't have much time to relax, as at that moment, the shadow he had seen before quickly approached him from behind. To avoid being caught, he turned around, and as soon as he did, he found that pen. The pen was surprised to see that he chose to flee rather than fight. Jiang Chen realized what he was saying was too loud, and he saw that it would draw the duck's attention. He thought this pen was too much of a traitor, but there wasn't much to do at that moment, since the pen gave away his location. The duck found him, and upon finding him, the ducks began running towards him as a group. The pen asked him to get up and use some magic to defend himself, and all this was because of the pen. The pen only wondered why he hadn't fought well earlier. He ended up saying he didn't want to. After all, he was almost managing to escape from the ducks, but now the ducks were nearly capturing our protagonist. However, to avoid being caught, he ran. While running, he looked at the map. But running ahead, he saw on the map that there was no way out. So while running, the pen still wondered why he wouldn't turn around and try to fight these ducks. At this moment, to avoid getting caught by the ducks, he completely ignored the pen that kept making up some nonsense. He ended up running through those rocks trying to find a way out as quickly as possible. He jumped over some rocks, and after jumping, he landed on the ground. But at that moment, one of the ducks had already caught up with our protagonist. He was about to be caught, but more quickly, our hero dodged. After dodging, he decided to look ahead, and as soon as he did, he found himself surrounded once again by this wave of ducks. But I think he made a mistake using that smoke bomb because after a while, he realized there were more ducks than usual here. While he was wondering about that, he ended up finding a different duck because, among these ducks, there was a more skilled duck than the others. Moreover, this skilled duck started mocking our hero. Knowing he had no more choice and didn't know how to escape, he thought of using that. After thinking about it, he used it. Those little dolls he could control. So, after thinking about it, he put it into practice, summoning several dolls similar to them. But the dolls did nothing. And while they did nothing, the other skilled duck started doing some things, advancing towards our hero. But to avoid, he dodges. Now that he dodged, he realizes why his skill that he had just used didn't work properly. The pen tells him to look more directly, since to use that skill there, it was necessary to make a realistic drawing more than that. So to redo that skill again, the pen ends up giving Jiang Chen some extra paints. Now she asks that our hero use more of that in a special way, making his drawing become something powerful. So he wonders if with that, he could possibly make that doll move. The pen responds that he could do that, but he didn't have much time as that skillful duck seems to make a command, where we then observe from behind the entire group of that duck advancing towards our hero, but not to be caught. Our hero uses something to defend himself, defending himself. He realizes that the attack from this monster was heavy. He might not be able to reach the speed of a monster like this, but he also couldn't stay still, because fighting a monster like this was difficult. But he needed to win. But this didn't help much, because the monsters did several attack combos on him, hitting all the combos on our hero. Now that he is fighting against the monster, he wonders if this is really how you fight, or maybe it isn't. But quickly he looks in the direction of those monsters there, his clones. But while he was watching his clones, he kept wondering in his mind, why is he so weak since he couldn't even hold a single duck like this? A weak duck. But to defeat the duck, he needed to try all or nothing. That's how he talks about it. He starts advancing in the direction of those drawings he made before, but while advancing, he thought he needed to increase more. Then, one of his fire points while running, he looked at his MP, where he realizes he was using a lot of it. So to maybe have a chance to win, he needed to get close to those little creatures he summoned before. And as he gets closer and closer, he starts imagining those dolls moving. While imagining this, the pen drew this in practice. The dolls start moving with eyes. After that, our protagonist realizes that they were coming to life because the dolls start running towards the ducks, while the ducks were already commenting to themselves that these clones just now were standing still. But why were these things moving quickly in their direction? But those ducks wouldn't do anything until they saw one of the dolls jump on them. But seeing that maybe these dolls could be weak, they start doing some combo there on the dolls, that not even the ducks had difficulty to finish off our protagonist's clone. While there, they were easily defeating those paper men we observed from behind the pen, thinking it was too weak. Jiang Chen even says it was paper. They only used it to distract those ducks. Now that it distracted them, they could run. So he runs towards a rock that was broken here in front of him. Then he manages to dodge the ducks, but looking at his leg, he realizes that it took some damage, so moving forward a little, he thought about stopping, because he needed to bandage that up soon. But he couldn't stay still here, because moving forward a little, he notices something strange inside this portal. He realizes that there is a dark hour inside, and so then we observe him picking up that map. But as soon as he touches that map, he realizes that this thing in front of him here were boss. But he wonders why a boss was here on this floor, since before it was said that the bosses inside the portal would be completely sealed, so they shouldn't worry about this. He realizes that it was weak. But why this thing that was open on his map? But he hears the noise of those ducks again, which makes him scared. So he thinks that he should run away from here immediately. Otherwise, the ducks would find him again. But he didn't have much choice, because the ducks found him faster than he thought. Something comes in his direction, and he is almost caught. But now that he is surrounded again, he needs in any way to survive, because those monsters were getting more and more hungry to defeat Jiang Chen. But at the moment they were thinking about it, they stop. They get scared by the thing, which makes him quite happy. And so could it be that these ducks were afraid of him? But no, he asks for them to stop, because he emitted no fear. What he felt was a pressure, and they wouldn't be afraid of our hero. They were afraid of something else. Then he slowly turns around, and as he turns, he realizes that behind him was the boss of this floor, which makes him freeze completely at this moment, looking back, getting scared. He tries to understand and tries to ask himself, how the hell was the boss here? He should have been entering inside that portal to find the boss. But no, the boss was cool. Came out of the portal to meet our hero. The fight should be worthy of both sides. While he was thinking about it. In the association here, we can observe some guys saying that they had quite big losses, but they didn't need to worry so much since their guild kind of ends up paying everything they ended up losing if they lost equipment. They paid for new equipment for them. He realizes that everything he did was also all part of his plan. But at this moment, he approaches two people who were talking about something curious. He asks what was going on, and for that, both reply that a level 3 hunter just entered the level 3 portal. But for some reason, the portal he entered ended up being sealed, which makes this manager quite worried about things, because he entered a dungeon where there was no boss. But if it's sealed, it's because there was a boss. Yes, he then asks to deliver this thing here, where there was information about our hero. Our hero tried to enter the dungeon alone. They even asked him not to do that. As soon as he heard that, he thinks that this guy was too stupid for seeing that he was wanting too much greed. The things enter the portal alone, and by the way, he was level 3. What was he thinking of doing in a portal like this alone? But already ignoring this, ends up discovering the professions he had. The profession he had was none. But he had a hidden class. Hidden classes didn't show up for a long time, and since it wouldn't be so rare to appear one now, but this wouldn't make much difference, because a hidden class appearing wouldn't change much in the world, but he also realized that he wasn't part of any group, which made them quite interested in our protagonist, foreseeing that also he has a hidden class which can give very good benefits for them and their guild. But after thinking a bit, he ends up thinking that no, he doesn't want to hire this guy for his guild. No, maybe he would be just some trash. He entered the dungeon alone, and if he is killed inside, it would be just some trash that would be disposable. Besides, he has other bigger priorities to solve, because some people are entering inside the dungeon inside their guild's portal. But for some reason, some people who enter there never come back to Earth. So then he has something like priorities to solve. These things were to kill some bosses. So he advances while advancing the scene. Here is already cut now to our hero here. But this thing was maybe not the time to appear, but the boss barely appearing already, then uses his hammer to hit our hero, who after being hit is thrown far away, which makes him then be thrown against the wall, now against the wall. We observe our pen there annoying him, while he saw that if by chance he hadn't used his arms to defend himself, he would already be all broken on the ground. But meanwhile, we observe the boss that from another place was already attacking other things. These things were the ducks at this moment. Then he saw that this boss attacked everything in front of him, so already knowing that the boss was against the ducks also gathered to attack the boss. He now then takes his chance he gained to try to get out of this dungeon. But the pen said it was impossible since here at the moment the boss appeared, and it was impossible for someone to come out of the portal knowing that they can't escape. He has one last option. That was his backpack. In the backpack, there were some smoke bombs that he could use to get away, but there were also some good potions in there. The pen wondered why he cared so much about this backpack since he could easily fight against this boss of his much more easily than he was imagining while running. The system shows there that he had already managed to defeat some monsters, and then, for having managed to kill that, he ended up almost completing the mission. However, to complete the entire mission, he needed to kill the boss. But he already had a winning strategy, he just needed that backpack of his. With that backpack in hand, he could certainly defeat that boss, but defeat how? How was that possible? Because at that moment, we then observed the boss attacking our protagonist again. Our protagonist saw only in the reflection of his eyes that sledgehammer approaching him, and then he was caught by it, but he quickly dodges that attack using one of his abilities with those papers. But by having used that ability, he ended up losing one of his papers, which means he basically lost one of his lives. But well, he wasn't stupid. He would use the papers that remained in the air to burn the boss alive anyway. Then he uses his fire ability, which completely ignites the boss. The boss, while engulfed in the fire, still wondered how he could possibly defeat something that was extremely fire-resistant, wondering as we only observed that boy walking towards our hero. Now he simply saw that approaching, but he couldn't do anything. Then he ends up getting hit squarely by that sledgehammer. Now that he was caught, he asks himself again if he was weak, but also with the abilities this monster had, how would he defeat something like this? He was thrown against the wall again, but still, he didn't give up. He gets up and grabs that backpack of his again. He used his last clone again, but now, by having used that, his mana dropped to 0. Furthermore, he sees the monster approaching, and again he realizes that the fire ability he had thrown at it was useless, since the fire didn't even have an effect on this monster. But looking on the bright side, this was the strongest boss he had ever faced in his life, and still survived for so long. But he still wondered if the system wasn't messing with him by putting him in a situation like this. Right, the boss was strong, he was just a loser. While thinking of giving up, the system appears again, saying that if he loses this fight, he will receive a punishment. So, perhaps ignoring this system, he sees that after so many life-or-death fights, he ended up in this one, where he can be sure he won't have the same chance as before. He just wanted to live as an adventurer because it was the opportunity he could earn money, but he also wanted to live a decent life outside these portals, so he still didn't want to die like this. He gained motivation at that moment. And as he gained this motivation, that pen of ours approaches our hero, saying that this was what he needed. Motivation. At this moment, as he approaches, we observe the boss attacking Jiang Chen. But instead of hitting him, our hero ends up quickly using that smoke bag, which makes the monster lose track of our protagonist for a few minutes, giving him the chance to run to the side. Now, from the side, we then observe the pen saying something there to our hero. It was just to follow it. The first thing, grab it, grabbing it firmly. The pen asks our hero to imagine a hard and strong sword. Well, he could use that to fight against his opponent. While he was imagining some crazy things in his head, we observe him thinking that this was life or death. The monster had the heaviest weight in the world holding it in its arms, but he needed to be smarter and stronger than them. But also, he has to notice that the monster's skin was made of steel, as no fire has any effect on this thing. So he needed to defeat it, since he never even had the chance to fight against a monster like this as an adventurer. But what weapon would you use to defeat something like this? So, for that, he needed to imagine his strongest force, while he also thought that this boss would not dodge his attack. He would simply make his move with his hammer in his direction, which would hit him, and so it was done. But now he wondered what kind of direction this boss would be attacking our hero in. He didn't know. Furthermore, he was moving here at high speed purely due to adrenaline. But he also began to stop and think because he saw that this monster always made attacks in a specific area. After imagining, he already knew what his next move would be, and as soon as he imagined this, we observed the boss attacking Jiang Chen. The pen asked him to dodge, but our hero did not do so, as he then moved that pen in hand in one direction, and at that moment here, he managed to dodge the attack. But the pen asked him to still be careful because this boss could counterattack, and thus he discovered that this boss only made an attack in one direction, so he couldn't change the move, which gave him the chance to defeat this boss with a single move. Our hero managed to split the monster in half. Now that he split the monster in half with the help of that pen, he was happy to see that it was all over, and also, for having used all this power here, he ended up completely exhausting his mana. This was his mana, so before the boss could get up again, he needed to finish him off as quickly as possible. Then he asked the pen to transform once again, and so it was done. From above the boss, our protagonist then attacked him, saying that it still wasn't enough. So he ended up setting the weapon on fire as well to make his blow stronger, and with that, he ended the boss's life. He was happy, and the system appeared, congratulating him for having killed a boss. And for that, he finally reached level 4. Now he also gained new abilities. One of these abilities is the pen's random transformation, which can give him powers that would possibly be something unimaginable to him. Now also, seeing the boss, he fell because his adrenaline had disappeared, making him unable to move anymore, but still, he got up because he saw that the pen's ability was to transform into anything. The pen said that he had no choice and had to follow the system's rules. Now that he defeated the boss, he left the portal, but as soon as he left, he reported all this to this person here, but the person, with a face that would trust a level 4 guy, ended up mocking him, saying that maybe all that he entered in the portal was an illusion. Boss? What boss? The association has nothing to do with it, but still, the association thanks him for his feedback so he could already withdraw. While he was thinking about leaving, someone in the background said not to worry because he checked the situation, and what he said was indeed true, so he wasn't a liar here. Then the guy called him to the manager, and now this manager would have a talk with the one who almost ambushed our hero. And our story today continues with that mysterious man still standing watching our hero. He then, after a good while, congratulates our protagonist for being a guy who alone managed to finish a Han dungeon all by himself. And because of this, he ended up earning some pretty good resources, and all those resources he won will basically be deposited into his account at this moment. So after delivering this information, they begin to stare at each other. After staring for a while, everyone suddenly starts moving towards their own side. Our hero follows his path while talking to the pen. The pen gets worried about that issue regarding that guy placing the money in his account, but our hero asks the pen to calm down a bit because that guy will be able to sort everything out for him without any problems. However, at this moment, he is surprised to see that he received a report earlier that our protagonist ended up going to Serkai, and the basic information he had matched perfectly with what he was wondering about. He came personally to see this, and the person he had seen dead is alive. So he asks the person beside him here to get back to work, while he ends up calling a certain person elsewhere. A cell phone starts ringing, and at this moment, we observe that spoiled guy from earlier, who was irritated with Cheng, answer the call. He then wonders what happened, as manager Jin is calling him personally. He ends up questioning what the situation is about a dungeon of corpses in the East Corridor district. Maybe they were using some kind of cheating, like using corpses to exploit a certain bug there to be one of the best in the dungeon. Then he comments that some media outlets are using that method from there, but there's also that damn elf guild with the eyes, but they're nothing special. However, with some manipulations in the networks, that could be considered an accident. Despite sending so many corpses into a dungeon, none of the rewards were improved, and the dungeon is basically at level 15, wasting the teleportation portal he had prepared earlier. So based on this information we've just discovered, this means that maybe our hero used some bug to survive the entire accident they had planned behind the scenes. But he also wonders if someone from his group ended up taking the reward, which alarms him, saying it was impossible. He set up that whole accident to get a very valuable reward inside that portal. But, well, he was also closely watching all the movements inside, and no one and nothing could enter or leave from there. But the manager who was listening to all this is surprised to see that he was so focused on watching that dungeon to see if anyone entered or left, since he ends up discovering that someone really managed to get out of that dungeon, but alive. Moreover, it wasn't just one person, but two people survived. Besides, this person passed by him a little earlier, and they alone managed to conquer a Han Chief dungeon on their own. He asks him to forget about the reward completely, and now to focus solely on capturing our protagonist and eliminating him. He agrees with this. But, well, he survived several level 20+ adventures, and in the end, survived the collapse of a double dungeon. And he wonders what he managed to gain at the end of all this. But now the scene changes to our hero as he leaves a bank. He feels sad about one thing, that the loot from a dungeon was basically too little. He thought he wanted to earn a fortune but didn't earn anything, since according to certain association rules, all the dungeon loot belongs to the association, but he has a small right to a share of the profit. In today's world, adventurers are likely to suffer and bleed to make a little bit of bread, and here, half of it all goes to the association, and they end up with almost nothing. So, many people, in the beginning, always give up, because it was very difficult to get good equipment and good resources. But what surprises our hero at this moment is the system that ended up giving some extra profits to Cheng. So at this moment, he also ends up discovering that upon completing a task, he gains rewards, and the rewards were good. And because he managed to eliminate a large portion of the ducks in that dungeon, it means that the next ones will have fewer ducks in the dungeons, which will be a big advantage for him. Thus, looking down, he kind of saw another screen of this system. But this one was different. Here, someone from the Underworld handed him something. This thing was a type of pill that Rem remodeled everything he needed. What it means is that this will reshape his skills, which may be tuning her much better, allowing him to become much more powerful in the future, which leaves our hero gaping. His happiness was such that the pen was surprised, and then he explains to the pen that what he won was huge, which will allow him to also overcome many bigger obstacles that are appearing in his future. So, we also end up discovering something that, by the way, this thing will allow him to reach several levels. But in the country now, currently, he has already managed to achieve something that no one else has managed to achieve. For you to be a powerful level 5 guy, you needed 452 points. But to reach that was very difficult, and for that, the state helps, but after you reach that, the state throws you away since maybe you can no longer be leveling up after that. Also, the higher the materials from the monsters, the rarer and more powerful they become. And at this point, adventurers must rely much more on combat equipment to fight the monsters. But always the first adventurers with weak classes are greatly disadvantaged by the unfair loot claim from the guild association. So, they basically need to focus on training until they can't anymore, since they can't afford good equipment to help them. Therefore, these types of people depend much more on their physical training to survive in a dungeon. If he then uses the XP cards he has, he can already reach level 5, but for that, he will need to train at the guild later. However, he ended up getting this thing from the system, and then the system asks him if he really wanted to be using it. Thus accepting, the scene cuts a few days later, he was in a place where he could be getting enormous information about this skill he has. Something that the pen didn't like and wanted to pull him out of that room by all means, since the pen wanted to have fun, not stay stuck here looking for useless information. Moreover, he ended up discovering that he also became quite resistant. But this is due to some things he has in his system. But for now, he shouldn't focus on these comments, but on strength and agility. This looks exactly like a random game's stat panel. Looking in another direction, he realizes that even the most recognized one, which is known as the evident skill at the current level, is not able to reveal much information about the class and numbers a certain person has. But often, to get something, many strategies are used, and he wonders how a class like that has such a powerful skill. However, after this, the system shows something there that was written, which leaves him a bit hilarious and finding this thing too weird. Why did comments like this decide to appear out of nowhere? But although his stats are a bit higher than those of common people, it is still clear that he can't yet compare himself to the other adventurers. He still needs to find an opportunity to buy good equipment, but he also ends up wondering what it means, showing there. Maybe this is the focus and the main point of his class, but after all, every class has a main focus. He uses mages as an example, who are a type of class like buffs, but there are also bards, who focus more on using music as their support to fight. But he realizes that the main focus of his strategy there, perhaps from the Underworld, is death. But this does not seem to be a very weak strategy, maybe of little relevance, because by using these abilities gained from the system, he realizes his mana runs out quickly. So, this would be almost useless to use. But at that moment, the pen appears and slaps our hero in the face and ends up there saying to him not to stop being less dependent on your class because your class was one of the strongest, and it was also so that they would listen, since he manages to control life and death. He also comments there that, right, he still hasn't been able to acquire the thing he wants so much. And because he hasn't unlocked certain items yet. So, he ends up remembering that maybe it's the book that comes with the pen. And if it was about that, it was basically something the King of Hell used in mythology to basically record human life, to be able to write or literally revive someone. This resembles another class. It would be a necromancer class. And in this world, this class would be a common class, but, well, the pen told him not to underestimate his ability again. That necromancer ability was not a useless ability since those abilities were just stealing his clients. But looking at the pen's stance, he realizes that maybe the ability to control the dead and the living isn't so useless after all. At this moment then, the pen starts explaining some mega important things to our hero. But well, he starts talking there, only for the system to start jumbling things up so that nothing makes sense. Nothing connects. What's implied is that the system was basically censoring our pen from giving the main and most important information. The system's task is to guide the panel. After all, they are basically something that controls the elements, which are somewhat common in the game. But now this was in real life. So, when investigating the hidden class, the Eye of the Dungeon record also involves some gods. But to know this information, he wonders if anyone has really ever entered a mythological dungeon to discover all of this. But well, strangely, there is no record that anyone was ever judged. The judgment was basically placed on the player. But for some reason, he ends up wondering why he was the only one to receive this kind of punishment. But, well, the truth is that he just discovered that maybe this is all perhaps a cheat, like having a cheat of trickery inside the game. So, it would be a fair punishment. But also, looking at the other side, he also got something else. It was passing the test of the gods. But now that he has passed the test of the gods, he ended up gaining certain qualifications. So he asks the pen what these qualifications are. The pen then responds to our hero that this thing is like a game. You need to be basically reaching a point to discover if there's a sword or maybe other good things for you to pick up. So, to discover more about the system, he will have to level up. The higher the level he reaches, the more he will be discovering about his own system. Now that he has discovered some more clues about the system, he can already leave that for later, since his priority now is leveling up. Since reaching level C, he will have an extremely high difficulty in leveling up to level 10 or 15. Now, with his confidence a little higher, but also in the world, a certain guild was throwing a party. This guild was putting several investigators on a certain person. That certain person was the guy who betrayed our protagonist. The objective of this elven guild is just to find out what really happened in a recent incident where several people ended up dying inside. But the elven guild wasn't making any progress, so they ended up taking that and putting it all over the internet, and it exploded in minutes. Also, the person who tried to disguise and planned all of this must be very strong. Moreover, if it weren't for the help of the system, it's very likely that this matter would have died inside that dungeon. But with the help of the system, he managed to spread the rumor that there was something strange inside that dungeon where several people died. But well, since there were strong people involved in this thing, our hero just wanted to stay away from this matter, since at the moment he was very weak, and if by any chance he tried to get into this whole fight, it's very likely that in the end, he wouldn't survive. All the joke, but anyway, these people will come after him. So for that, he needs to get strong since he doesn't have maybe a third life. He saw it by great luck, then he already got a second life, and that's why he has to get strong. But changing the subject out of nowhere, he wonders who were the two people who survived in that dungeon, and here he says the name if it was a certain Shannon and others. Well, Karita said that it was almost impossible to recognize. He just said that only two people survived, and he didn't know the names of the people who survived yet, but they managed to hide. This was enough for the two to survive the whole fight inside that dungeon. But grabbing his necklace, he starts looking at the subject that was happening on the internet, but he sees there that in the subject, the names of his friends or the names of the survivors were not mentioned. It's likely that they hid the names of these people to avoid rumors. But now, our protagonist wonders if maybe those two were his friends who perhaps survived. So for that, the two should be going there to investigate a little more closely. So the next day, our hero arrives shamelessly at the hospital and asks if someone had survived from that rank dungeon they had gone to and if he could get more detailed information. He said it was someone important from his family, and he wanted to know the information to find out if they were alive. And for that, the woman there would check, since in that dungeon, almost everyone had died. Then they move deeper into the hospital, but out of nowhere, an eye of something appears inside a portal. And that eye was from frogs. Those frogs stretch their tongues and head towards the people, and the people who were there end up being caught and taken inside that portal. But from another place, we observe a rich girl scolding her servant, who for some reason was forcing her to come to the hospital, as she had participated in some dungeon, and in the end, she ended up getting hurt. But she was quite busy these days, and while talking about it, one of those frogs' tongues grabs her and pulls her into that dimension. But from another place, that tongue goes into other rooms where it grabs several people. But among these people trapped in that hospital, we only observe some hunters, seeing that something was going to happen to the patients in that hospital. He steps in front and tells them to be careful. In the end, he ended up being caught, but other nurses were also caught in this game. Meanwhile, from another place, our protagonist wonders why monsters were appearing inside a hospital and also where that was taking them. But to answer that, one of those tongues comes his way and grabs Chang. But to avoid being caught, he tries to dodge, but it doesn't help much because in the end, he was caught and dragged into a portal. Now, inside the portal, he sees that he was teleported inside. After looking ahead, he realizes that several people ended up inside that portal too. Some were just being treated, and now they were inside that dimension. While everyone was complaining, a pink-haired girl points forward and says that someone was ahead. At this moment, they are sent into a different castle. Inside this castle, he was surprised by the size of this gigantic castle. While surprised by this, a system screen appears, saying that they were sent to an isekai. But inside this isekai, a war of frogs was happening. So the heroes were sent with only one objective, to fight against the frog and save the certain kingdom. As soon as the people observe that thing appearing in front of them, they are surprised to see that they were in another world. But as soon as they complete this mission, they will win a kiss from this princess, which makes some guys happy about it. But this is a Pokemon of sorts, a portal options Pokemon. There are countless undiscovered portals in the world, but he still wonders if there is an unknown portal inside a hospital that suddenly appeared. But he thinks that's impossible. This was a newborn portal. So Karita said that they could wait a bit to see what was happening. At this moment, he also notices that some people were caught, like 12 of them. They are divided into some people, 10 are adventurers, 2 are individuals with no power at all, who are common people. but among the strongest adventurers. The ones who were around there, these two from here, were the strongest. One was already level 9, while the other was level 8. So, to pass this challenge for them, there would be no difficulty at all. However, here from another place, that rich girl appears, who says she's not in the mood to stay in this thing here. No, she asks for these two stronger adventurers to fight the boss as quickly as possible to end this, and in the back, there was a guy who was just a regular person. He just wanted to get out of this place and didn't want to get involved in a situation like this. And then we find out that these are the lone wolves. What this means is that it's a huge risk among them here inside the dungeon. They are guys who invade dungeons, and basically, they have random SP, which means the guild has no control over these passages. So, he knows they will clear everything inside, no matter who it is, and his goal now is to eliminate these two as fast as possible. But also, right, this portal just appeared, and so it wasn't a good idea to be acting so stupidly from here. So, he should have been acting more calmly to solve all the situations that will happen ahead. At this moment, he advances towards those level 8 and level 9 hunters here, calling their attention. They turned in his direction, but one of them starts holding his head, while the other was already trying to do some things with Cheng. But the reason for acting this way was that they were afraid that our hero would take their resources. But he said he wasn't up for that. No. He just asked them to be careful, but he looks at him and realizes that he was level 4. What did a level 4 guy think he was doing here, giving orders to level 8 guys? This was a dream for them. Despite these guys being completely stupid and too reckless, he realizes there's something more to these guys. They are both quite strong. But at this moment, when he was kind of being bothered by these two guys, we see other people in the background thinking that what he was doing was too stupid, because they are basically inside an unknown portal. But it looks like a stupid hunter from here, who would already be planning something stupid from here. But the moment he was going to do something, we observe someone stopping him with a single force. Besides, he agrees with our hero that they shouldn't act in a stupid way. But right. He realizes that the two were high level because why would a high level guy be showing such a negative emotion that he is killing our Cheng? But as soon as the whole situation calmed down, the pink-haired girl approaches our hero and starts scolding him, saying that he was stupid to be in that way. These portals here are not under the guild's control, which means that the people inside can do whatever they want. Knowing that she would continue with that scolding, he apologizes and understands what really happened. But he thinks that the MC here can handle these monsters, only that from another place, two others appear and tell them to be careful, as they didn't want to die, right? They are two regular people. What would they be doing? They can't fight monsters. The most that would happen to them if a monster appeared is to die. Besides, then our hero appears and tries to calm the situation. He ends up saying that, theoretically, they are basically in another dimension, but the dimension they are in is a dimension that's basically calm until the point they are at. But currently, he ended up basically stating that they are basically inside the mirror dimension. This is a portal with a superior dimension mirror. It simply projects the backgrounds of a mythical or historical era, and so it goes reflecting the previous world of humans. But in reality, all that needs to be done here is just to complete the missions. By completing the missions, they could leave this dimension. Now that there are some hunters and adventurers here inside, he thinks that there will be no difficulty at all. But at this moment, he is interrupted by that rich girl who said there was no need to worry. She is quite wealthy in the outside world. People, her family there, will basically be discovering that she disappeared, which will make people and guards run after her. So, she just needs to wait. At the end, our hero ends up discovering that she is also a lone wolf, which worsened their situation inside this portal even more. But while the whole situation was happening, the mission ends up appearing. At this moment, a kind of monstrous frog with the name labeled as Princess appears. The world is in shock, especially this guy who was crazy but is kissing the princess. Disappointed with life, he ends up on the ground. On the ground, he ends up disbelieving in life. He thought the princess here would be beautiful, but this horrible monster here. But the princess didn't like it. She uses her tail on that guy, which in minutes makes that guy disappear completely. At this moment, everyone observes what was happening, and seconds later, we see everyone screaming in fear. The people here were totally scared. Our guy, however, notices that the frog managed to do a hit kill on the guy, and with just one strike, managed to kill the strongest guy around here. At this moment, he asks that no one does anything too stupid, but it didn't help, as the frog attacked someone else again and killed them in one hit kill. He realizes that the killing happened again, but in just one hit, which signified the strength of this monster. But after thinking about it, he realizes that this dungeon has an absolute rule. But what kind of rule was that? However, people were already thinking of running to get out through the portal. At this moment, we observe those two just watching everything that's happening here, and things for him started to get a little funnier now. But he also tries to think that the first death was because, well, the guy basically did nothing, just rejected the princess. But that's not a reason for a princess to do such a thing. But there must be some kind of pattern behind all this. The person who was considered the leader was killed first, but before he died, he talked about a loyalty he had with the princess. But well, for some reason, he rejected the princess, and he met his end. So he thought of 3 rules. The first rule is not to meet the princess, the second is to complete the mission, and the third is not to attack the only NPC. At this moment, the pen appears and realizes that this portal was not just a portal, but like an ancient test from the gods that was about to happen. So it means that the system is basically in the underworld, which means it will be working in a perfect way, maybe because the divinity was still around here. But for some reason, that was not the case at the moment. This is the call of the fairy world, which has its activity destroyed. So the system was basically incomplete, and he also noticed that there were some bugs that made him unable to see the end of this dungeon. Then the pen asks him to just take care of his life and let the people here take care of theirs. But there's a catch. If he lets that happen, chaos will really break loose. Literally, disasters will happen to everyone, and most likely he won't be able to survive, perhaps in this whole mess. But he needs to move, so he steps in front of everyone and asks everyone to stop. Some ask him to leave, but he says the main rule of this dungeon: if anyone goes against and ignores these princess rules, she will be killing everyone. So, if no one leaves here, everyone will live up to a point where Recap appears and says he was a level 4 guy, and why should she believe him? Then Cheng tells her to leave. The door was right there. Just leave, but she freezes and says she wasn't firm anymore. Then the pink-haired girl approaches our hero and says he has a point. And thanks to Cheng, they were now able to survive. Now, he just needs to complete the mission. At this moment, she opens her system screen, and at this moment, she accepts the proposal to participate in the mission. The system appears saying that everyone accepted, and there were only a few seconds or minutes left for them to complete that option. Otherwise, everyone would be dying. But as soon as they accepted that, we observed the ground trembling. At this moment, another mission screen appears. This was the mission that was beginning. Their new mission was easy: protect the castle and basically defend it from the army of swarms of insects that were invading their territory.